Today on the Connection Codes podcast, we are going to dive into a small conflict that Wes and I had last week that I missed on. I would say this was me missing, and we were able to resolve it quickly because of the connection codes, but it's been a stumbling block over and over again, and that is just simply what I view, and it's not what his intention is, but the pressure of sex. And sometimes I just want to ride in the car and not talk about it. It just feels like it's just this weight at times, and I'm finally at a point where I'm enjoying it, but I still don't want it to be such an important part of our relationship. And I just missed him completely when he brought it up. And so I know that I'm not alone in this, so I just wanted to let's talk about sex and the pressure that one partner can feel in sex, where even if it is fun, it cannot be as fun anymore because of the pressure. So thank you all for joining us today. This is the podcast where we break open our emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in ourselves and in our relationships. And so welcome to the Connection Codes.
Yeah. Hello, world.
Hi,
and we're
friends.
glad to be here. Thank you.
Yes, we
Tera.
are. So, wow, I love that. I just, my regret already is that Wes Wages is not sitting here with us.
Agreed.
But he
just
can
thinking
listen
that.
to this podcast for sure. So, yeah, as soon as you shared that, Tera, I always want for us to go a little deeper to figure out what's behind that.
Yeah.
Even that terminology, the pressure, which in our early married life, early years, definitely could relate to that. Like, definitely could relate to that. It felt like a pressure. It was an unwanted pressure. And now where my brain goes is trying to figure out what is in the category of unwanted pressure. Like, if you and Wes were driving down the road and you started talking about your next vacation, would that create unwanted pressure? No. Or, even the weekend coming up, like, babe, what are we going to do this weekend? Would that be unwanted pressure? No. So, and I know that though, for some couples, they might actually say yes to that and go, every weekend I feel pressure that my wife or vice versa wants some grand adventure and I'm exhausted by the weekend. And so I feel pressure. It's getting though under that. So even let's take the idea that you're driving in the car with your spouse and one of you says, oh, what can we do this weekend? And the other person is hit with pain because it feels pressure.
Yeah.
And so to go, what's happening there? Because there's more behind that.
Yeah.
And I think, it's interesting for us, like even more now current, is when you are dreaming or you talk about like wanting to replace the mailbox with a rock that will be created into a mailbox. Well, I respond negatively to that because I get flooded with pain, pressure to make it happen. Because you're the dreamer, I'm the realist. I take on that. Like, I think, okay, now it's a project I have to actually execute on. I have to find someone who can work with rocks, who's creative, who's an artist. Can we budget that? And then will you be happy in the end?
Let me just interject because it's a pain experience, but I think it's probably a hybrid of pain and fear.
Yeah.
And that's what produces the pressure, the pain of in and of itself, the idea of it, but then the fear of, I hate to use the term executing it, but the fear of making it happen, the fear of implementing it.
Yeah.
So if we took that example and put it into that conversation, what happens for you in the car with Wes if he brings up the topic of sex?
Yeah, I would agree in fear that he is wanting, that now there's an expectation of me to do something that we were talking about something totally different 4 minutes before that came up, 30 seconds before that came up. And I'm in my mindset where we're talking about business or we're talking about something. And then all of a sudden he brings up sexual joy, is what we refer to it as. And now I'm like, oh gosh, we've just completely turned paths. I'm not mentally prepared for this. Now I have to do this thing that he's wanting to do, and I have to do it right now.
Oh, wow.
And I just want to talk about the other thing that we were talking about, you know? And yeah, so I have fear, and then that fear turns into guilt because I don't want to have sex right now. And then it just spirals. Then I have shame because I'm not a more sexual person that's willing to be more risque as we drive down the road and, you know, have some kind of sexual experience driving down the road. And so now I have guilt, and I have fear, and I have shame, and I have sadness because I've now made him sad. And so for me, how I missed in that moment was that he shared with me that, you know, he was thinking about sex, or that he was wanting to do something sexual. And I was like, oh, guilt. You know, like I have guilt that I don't want to do that right now. And then I left it. I was like, I processed my emotion. I felt guilt, and we can just move on from this. And then a few minutes later, he was like, you know, you can't just say guilt. You know, that he was like, I was processing something, and then you say guilt, and then now you think the conversation is just done. You know, I'm not done. And so then we had to work through that. And how the conversation started, I guess this is important to say, is it started by him saying, you know, I wish that you were more turned on when I'm with you, because I have a tendency to get more turned on when he's out of town or I'm out of town or something like that. And so I was like, well, the conversation started by me feeling shame that I'm not who you want me to be. And so it could have easily turned into a cyclone. It did not turn into a cyclone. It did not spiral, but we had some misses there because I was feeling this pressure.
Right. And I don't know whether to interrupt or not
Do it.
because anytime a couple or any relationship misses each other, there's an unprocessed emotion. That's where people start getting lost from each other. So what was the first unprocessed emotion for this couple? And of course, Wesley's not here, unfortunately, so that'll teach you, Wes, to show up more often.
To take care of our children right now.
That irresponsible person, he should be here with us. Forget those kids. I'm kidding. I hope everybody knows. So what was the first unprocessed emotion for this couple?
I think it may have, because we talked about it. Wes and I did. We were able to dive into this together.
Cool.
And he's so awesome. And please know that Wes is
we adore
so
Wes.
happy to talk about this to help other couples. And so I think his actual first unprocessed emotion was he was thinking joy about sex. And then because of our history with it, I think it quickly turned to sad. And so he was experiencing sexual joy, thinking about being with me. But then his brain said, oh, no, she doesn't want to be with you right now, which sadly, his brain was right in that moment. I wasn't wanting to do anything. And so it turned quickly into sad, which then he relayed to me, you know, I wish that you would get more turned on
Are
when
you
I'm
sure
not
that's
there.
sad?
It could be hurt. It was a pain experience.
Yeah, it sounds like lonely.
Lonely.
To me.
Okay.
He feels
Yeah.
unpartnered, unconnected with his partner, his sexual partner in that moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because, and again, I don't know how accurate your narrative is, but if in fact he said, I don't want to misquote you, I wish you got more turned on when I was in town.
Yeah.
Well, that's all logistical. He's describing the situation, and that is in no way connecting. And I really, really like Tera and Wes, and I know them pretty well. That's never going to connect Tera to him, because he basically just criticized her. He just said, you know, whatever message you received, but, you know, you're not correct. You're not good. You're not right. You're not a good wife. You're not a good sexual partner. Well, I don't know the human on the planet that would feel connected in that.
Right.
That would be like, oh, thank you. That feels so good that you just criticized me and told me how inadequate I am.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the danger in even a statement like that is that if you actually took those words, I wish you were more turned on, then you could take that and go, what's wrong with me? I must be broken. And I mean, we've sat with couples where it's like verbally said, yeah, you don't turn me on anymore. Like it's as though there's something like in that, like kind of going, wait, where does that come from? Is that what we were taught in Hollywood? Is that what we were taught from Cosmo magazines? Like that whole idea of, that's what the sexual relationship is built on.
Right.
Do you turn me on or do you not turn me on?
Right.
And well, when we were dating, you turned me on, and now I don't experience that same feeling. So obviously I just need to be done with this, and I need to move on to another relationship, because it's all based on this thing that we call you turn me on or you don't turn me on. And that's just really dangerous, because it's kind of, to me, because then you start questioning, even like as a woman, you go, okay, well, maybe I have low libido, and maybe I need to go see my gyno, and maybe I need to, and then you kind of, you make it a really big, complicated thing.
Yeah.
Instead of actually, if he had expressed the loneliness in it, we can totally show up for that.
Yeah.
Like, and it's interesting because we have talked about sexual friendship, and that is that's a module in our late night e-course and it's interesting when we have conversations with people about sexual friendship. It's not a term that people use. It's not a term that, is out there. It's kind of right. But it's like, because when friendship, when you think about friendship, like I think there's times when our youngest daughter, if we are meeting to go do something, she'll often say to me, Mom, I'm going by Starbucks. You want something? My answer 100% of the time is yes. But the truth of the matter is I don't ever do Starbucks. But when she says, you want something from Starbucks, it's relational.
Yeah.
It's my friendship with her that says, yes, I want Starbucks because you're doing Starbucks. I love you so much. And I find so much joy in the idea that you'll be drinking something and I'll be drinking something from Starbucks. And usually I'd order tea. I'm not a big coffee person. So I order chai tea from Starbucks. But it's like, it's not in my normal routine at all.
Yeah.
But with her, there's a flood of joy. It's a friendship flood. And, and then I actually have girlfriends who'll reach out and go, will you go have coffee with me? I don't go, I don't even like coffee, so no. I'm so excited about the friendship that I'm like, absolutely, I will meet you for coffee.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll sit there and sip on a coffee that I really don't even enjoy because I want to have coffee. And I think that, to me, that's what I love about the idea of sexual friendship, is just that I can show up for you because of the friendship. And it changes. And I know we've all been so conditioned. Like, I totally get that. And I think that even, using the word, like, I feel pressure, that's such a pain point. Like, that even sounds like such a pain point. And I think about that, like, if my youngest daughter called or texted and said, you want something from Starbucks, if what motivated me was pressure, or if I felt pressured to say yes, that would be a pain point. That would be a sad point for sure, where I just find, because of the friendship, so much joy in that.
Yeah, we're never told what would have been, but I just can't help but wonder if Wes was able to start the whole thing differently.
Yeah.
To be able to say to you, even in that moment, and I don't remember the narrative already, but so were those his first words, just that I wish you got more turned on when I was in town?
In my mind, that's what I heard first.
Okay. Because, again, my goal for every human on the planet, which includes Wesley, is for him in that moment to be able to say to you, I get hit with a little bit of loneliness, that you seem to get turned on more when I'm out of town than when I'm in town, the very time that I want you to be turned on, because I feel so much joy getting to play with you, being sexual friends with you. You rock my world, et cetera, et cetera. Can't prove or disprove because we are never told what would have been. But I'm thinking that changes the whole dynamic of the conversation.
I totally agree with you. And it's interesting because we worked through this, and I was able to share with him the shame that I felt immediately how the conversation started. And he was like, oh my gosh, that was not my intention, which just again proves that we don't need better intentions. Like we have great intentions. Wes never intends to hurt me. And just like 3 minutes later, I hurt him. Not my intention. But even then, as we were processing, it never registered to me that, oh, this was a logistic that you started with, And so it's interesting to have this conversation to think, well, most things that we are starting conversations with are the logistics, and without even realizing that we're starting with logistics.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons we push people, number one, do the core emotion wheel endlessly, which I know that you and Wes do, to tune us in to those, because we don't recognize them. And then we encourage people, start every paragraph, and I'm not talking about legalistically, but basically start every paragraph, every topic, every interaction, every discussion with the core emotion. So literally, I don't walk in the room and say to Phyllis, where are the car keys? And I drive a Tesla, so I don't have car keys, but you get the idea. I don't say, where are the car keys? I walk in and I go, oh, I'm feeling some fear. She literally does the 3 phrases. Oh, what's happening with fear? What am I missing? I'm like, I can't find the car keys. And those are connecting conversations. Number one, she knows what's happening with me. Number two, she doesn't feel accused. If I walk in, and I know we've sat with tons of couples, if somebody walks in and says, where are the car keys? It's almost always an accusation.
Yes.
And it almost always leads to tension, maybe conflict, maybe a disconnect, who knows. So start each, again, whatever you label it, the paragraph, the topic, the interaction, with the core emotion. And I'm not sure, but that if Wes had started with, I think I get hit with some loneliness and maybe even a little bit of shame, because I hear you, Tera, saying that you get turned on the most when I'm out of town, when I'm gone.
Right, yeah.
So I think I get hit with some shame in that what's wrong with me that when I'm around her, she doesn't get turned on when I'm 1,000 miles away from her, or whatever it is that's happening for him in the moment. I think that changes the whole dynamic of the interaction.
I agree. I do think that it changes. And then my fear, though, is that I would have reacted even more poorly. And I'm being super honest with you, only because, man, I would have definitely tuned into his core emotion for sure. But I still would have felt whiplash in that moment of like, we were just talking about business. I mean, literally talking about business. How did we get here? Like, why are we suddenly talking about sex again? And I say again. And
so what would the core emotion for you in that moment have been?
That's a good question. Probably, maybe sad.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. That we were talking about something. We were on a roll. We were working through this business thing. I was excited about it. I am a very goal-oriented task person. And I was just really pumped up about, we just met with a financial planner, and I was just pumped up thinking about what our next moves were going to be business-wise. And ultimately we joked about it after that. Oh, we were talking about business and Wes got turned on, And so
let me guess, and it's always dangerous to conjecture another human's experience, but didn't you maybe also get hit with fear that you weren't going to get back to that discussion that you felt so much joy about? It was such a productive future plans, big victory, et cetera, et cetera. Is that close?
Yes. Yeah. No, and I agree.
Want you to tell him that.
Yeah.
For everybody on the planet, I want them to, in that moment, you experienced it, just say it.
Yeah. And so I think that obviously I do want the time and space to talk about Wes's loneliness. Sure. But for me, if we were in the middle of this conversation, that when we were just driving with it, if instead of thinking about the future and building the future with you gives me so much joy that I'm getting turned on. I think that would have changed everything for me. Him sharing, because his first core emotion wasn't lonely, actually. His very first one was the joy, but then it quickly turned to the sad or lonely because of the damage that I have done to him in the past. And so I think that just further proves the point, because you often say, well, what was the first one? What was the first one? And I've had moments,
Yep.
even though I'm a fairly decent connection coder at this point, but I've had moments where I've thought, do we really have to start with the very, very first one, you know? And this right here just shows the power of really leading with that first one.
Yeah, and again, we always go back, our research so much with children. What do children do? They start with the first emotion first, then they do the next emotion next. We never sat around and wondered when Tera was 12 months old what was happening with her. We always knew because she was always authentic, and she wasn't authentic because she's so dang smart. On her 1-year birthday, she decided to be authentic and live her life that way. No, it's coded inside of her. We're faith-based. We believe God designed it. If it's evolutionary, it's the same result. That's how humans function from birth. And somewhere along the way, we get knocked off course. We get reprogrammed. We never get recoded. So, yeah, and again, you just picture that. And I have to give the caveat. We're never told what would have been. But if Wesley starts with the very first authentic core emotion, says to you, oh, I just got hit with joy. Tera does the 3 phrases. Oh, what's happening with joy? What am I missing? I don't know. Just thinking about the future with you, planning for the future, thinking about us being successful, winning together, kind of turns me on. I feel sexual joy. I'm not trying to feel sexual joy. I just do. I like you. And I just got flooded with sexual joy. And then I got hit with sexual loneliness because you say the thing about if I'm out of town or whatever it is. Yeah, that's a whole different discussion than what you had.
Yeah. I totally agree with that completely. And afterwards, when we were, making the full circle and coming back around, because for me, I can get annoyed that everything always circles back to sex. We do. And I know, Glenn, you have joked about how many seconds a day you think about sex.
Right.
And, early in my life, I remember hearing like every 9 seconds men think of sex or something like that. And so as a woman who doesn't think about sex every 9 seconds, I can very easily get annoyed that that's such a big topic in my life because I chose to marry a man. Like that is sexually driven and has a higher sex drive than I do. And so it's just easy for me to get annoyed with it. But then I'm able to, I guess, process my own annoyance at times and think about what my life would be if he never was trying to talk to me about it. And the loneliness that I would feel. Right. And so sometimes the very thing that we feel a lot of pressure in, and it's not even pressure he's putting on me, it's pressure I'm putting on myself. The absence of that pressure would deplete us in a completely different way.
Right.
So I just want to think about that for people that are out there thinking like, oh my gosh, yes, so much pressure to have sex all the time.
Yeah, and a little fear in saying this because I don't really even mean it exactly the way I say it. We did a podcast on psychological disorders. Let's just start with a baseline, which I don't believe this about Wes, but let's just go ahead and start that as the baseline, that his psyche is disordered. Let's say that he talks about business success, future financial plans, et cetera, whatever, and that becomes erotic for him. Now, from where you sit, probably from where I sit, I think from where Phyllis is, we would go, what? Wait, you're talking about dollars and more dollars, and then that's a turn on for you? I don't think it would be for me, maybe. I can connect anything to sex, so maybe it would.
So that's the thing. Anything can be connected to sex. Yeah.
So maybe, but again, I don't believe that's true, Wes, but let's just lay that as the baseline. That, okay, his psyche is disordered, and somehow he connects more dollars to sex. Okay. I just want him to be able to process through that. The longer that you're connection coding, you'll get that more and more that, okay, this guy, for whatever reason, we can analyze him to death, psychoanalyze him endlessly, but for whatever reason, he gets hit with sexual joy. And the other side of it, and I'm always careful as a man saying this to a woman, but it's kind of cool. I mean, you've been together a bit. How many times have the two of you been involved sexually?
Especially in the last 2 years since the late nights, quite a few times.
Aww.
So
but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean,
I think
a couple
we're
of times
over
a week
50 here. We're over 100 here.
Yeah.
And he likes you.
Yeah.
He still likes you. That's pretty cool. And, Phyllis figured that out a good while ago, just that, dang, and she realized that, she's not the 15-year-old that I met. She's not the 19-year-old that I married. And I still am rocked by her.
Yeah.
And she likes that. That brings her identity. It brings her joy. Is my sex drive much higher than hers? Yeah, it is. Always has been. I assume it always will be. But she's like, shoot, this is pretty cool. I'm, 45 years old, 50 years old, 55 years old, and he's still enthralled with me. That's pretty cool. So my hope would be that at least in the back of your mind, you have that joy point that, dang, this is pretty cool, that this guy is still kind of mesmerized by me sexually. And I would suggest you will be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, even more so than he is now.
I keep going back to just that term that, because I've heard it from other women for sure. Like, I feel pressure. And to kind of and of course I go back to just that idea, the friendship that we have with people, the friendship, we call it, sexual friendship, we talk about that, but then just an overall friendship. And I don't know, but that I would be curious to know if this plays out in other things in your life, other relationships where you feel pressure. Like, I feel pressure. I feel like I have to show up there. I have to, I have to get on the list of bringing a meal to that person who just had a baby. I feel pressure. Like, if there's pressures that you conform to because of society, like if there was, sometimes I go back to, did you feel pressure, in your dating relationship with Wes? Did you feel pressure to hold his hand? Did you feel pressure to kiss him? Like, and if it's always been there, like, has that pressure always been there? Or did it grow more after having 4 children? And, and I know that like for us, there was so much pain and fights that we had in our sexual relationship that, I would say I definitely lived, and I don't know if it was 10, 20 years feeling the pressure.
Yeah.
Like panic almost. But it came from, I believe, our early years of fights.
Right.
Just like, I did not, from our honeymoon on, sex was like, on our honeymoon, it was like the opposite of what I thought. I thought we had saved this part because it was ultimately the most incredible ever, like something mystical, spiritual. And in those first few minutes when we had intercourse for the first time,
it wasn't minutes.
I wanted to give
Thank you for the compliment.
I wanted to give you minutes, babe.
Minutes.
I wanted to give you minutes.
Word. Well, but I do want to interject something on that that's so important. It's just such a fundamental miseducation. It's bizarre, and you and I are very intelligent people, and we always have been. It's bizarre that these two very intelligent people thought, and again, it's just total lack of education and miseducation, there are not enough nerve endings in the vaginal walls to produce much pleasure at all for a female. Now, every female is unique. I mean, there's variation, but there's just not. We know this. This is just a scientific thing. So it's bizarre that we thought that, once we put tab A into slot B, fireworks, whole new world, nirvana, we've reached it. And, of course, where we are today, many years later, as far as education and what we do, it's just stunning that we thought that was going. And I thought it too. I thought, once I put tab A into slot B, that woman's going to be over the moon. There's a lot of shame in it, but I'm just stunned that we genuinely thought that if we just, now that we're married, we'll put tab A into slot B and live happily ever after. It's just so sad.
And, and I think that goes back to, yes, lack of education, miseducation, the fact that this is such a taboo subject. We don't talk about it. and we've been married 40 years. And I don't think things have changed. I think it's still a taboo topic. Right. We don't talk about it. And so there's so much damage done and so much pain and when you have that in the first few days, weeks, months, and years of your marriage, it's kind of like, someone, and that's what I think of when even the word, I feel pressure in sex, it's like if we understood that we were created for pleasure, and if sex was pleasure, like to me, it's, it's kind of a crazy, I don't know what your favorite, food is, but like, I think about, mine is endless. I have a very long list of foods that bring me great pleasure. But, when someone suggests, like, even when I'm trying to be really good, I am so easily derailed. Like, if someone goes, let's go out for ice cream, I'm like, I'm all in.
Yes.
And I'm like, even though I have sworn off sugar this month, it's an exception. I am the exception girl. Yeah. Like, if you invite me out for ice cream, I am there with you. And it's like, I've totally forgot what I was trying to say. I got so excited about the idea of ice cream.
Excellent
I'm like,
point.
man, where is there an ice cream place on this very hot day in May? Wow.
The end.
Where was
You need this, you deserve it.
Where was I going with that?
Going to find ice cream. Well, I do have a thought, though, about what you were saying earlier as far as where that pressure can even come from. And so I've really been processing what that is for me as an individual. And for us, our sexual journey very much was similar to y'all's in the fact of, because you asked, was it pressure before you got married? No, dude, it was awesome. I mean, we never put tab A into slot B before we got married, but we say all the time that's one of our biggest regrets, because it would have been bomb, because we were making out, things were good. And then as soon as we crossed over that line, then we were just on over there. And then I started feeling shame and just all of these things, that I lost all joy in sex. And so for years, until we discovered the connection codes and late night, I had no joy in sex. And even more so, there was a lot of damage on both of us. I damaged him, he damaged me. Sexually, and even still, now that we are in a good place, now that I am having a lot of joy in sex and finally understanding the pleasure part of that, it's still so much work for me. It is so mentally draining and vulnerable and exhausting, because even if it's something quick we do, if there's any goal of me leaving feeling pleasure, it takes a lot of effort. And obviously it's like a workout. After I do it, I'm so glad that I did. But the thought of getting up and getting dressed and driving myself to the gym and lifting weights just sounds miserable. And so I think that I'm still, especially because we have 4 young kids. In this season, we are in the process of growing a business, a new business. We are in the process of moving. We have so much on our plates that for me to add on something that is so vulnerable and takes so much effort for me, that's why it feels like pressure still.
Yeah, and let me throw in there too the whole trauma piece. And we use the working definition of trauma is a current emotional response based on a past event. So you and Wes have trauma. And so when you're driving in the car, even if Wesley just quote unquote perfectly connection codes it, that still can trigger you. Again, I think we've greatly increased the odds of it connecting you. But that, based on just the trauma from the past experience, that can still be triggering for you, and for you to be able to process that with him in the moment to go, sad. Feels like, and I feel some shame because it feels like that should be a joy experience for me, but it's not. It's a pain experience. You're not trying to feel pain. You're not trying to feel the burden, the sadness of it. You just do. And I think Wes gets that, and we get that in that moment. This is why we don't use terms like healing. We don't use terms like fixing, because that's not the human condition. You're not, number one, you're not needing to be healed of this, and you're not going to be.
Yeah.
This is just something you're going to process through every time that it happens. So I think that's dangerous sometimes when we pathologize. We go, oh my gosh, well, Tera needs to be healed of what happened with her 5 years ago, 8 years ago. And I get it. Each human's unique, and if it's benefited you, I'm happy for you. That's great. But in general, people are just going to experience what they experience next time. And I don't care if they experience it. I just want them to process it. And when they get good at that, they'll process it in 15 seconds, and that changes the whole dynamic. Because you may get hit 20 years from now when, Wes makes some sexual comment and you feel pressure. Okay. Well, I just want you in that moment to go, oh, sad. That didn't elicit sexual joy with me. That just kind of felt pressure, felt painful, felt fearful. He's going to go, oh, what's happening with that? What am I missing? And they'll connect.
This is, as we close out this particular podcast, it's just such a good reminder that we got to be talking about this stuff.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like what we have just now talked about in this podcast opens up probably like immediately in my mind 20 more podcasts talking about sex. And even sometimes when someone says, oh, do a podcast on sex, where my mind goes is the mechanics. And then when we have this conversation, I'm like, oh, can we talk another hour about this? Like we need a part A, part B, or what? Like, there's so much in just understanding just what happens for us in all of this, and that this is our story. Like as in, that's why, even you saying, I think because of our trauma and pain in life, even the term, healing, it's like, define that, please. What do you mean? Can we sit down and talk about that? Because that alone will bring help or /healing in just being able to give me space to talk about my story. But the fact is, my story is going to forever be my story. The pain that you and I have lived through, our honeymoon story will always be the same. And I never know when something will trigger. That's the incredibleness of our brain. That's the incredibleness of how emotion, it just fires. You don't choose it. All of a sudden, something comes through, and I go back into that moment of pain. And it's so beautiful for me just to be able to say to you, ow, and for you to tune in and to find out what's happening with me, and to go, well, I was just remembering, that particular story or that part of our life. And I appreciate, Tera, your openness just with what happened with you and Wes recently. And I really want to dive more into, obviously a future podcast on even the idea of the, you're more turned on when he's gone. So I really want to dive into that. And I love your openness. And of course, if you're listening today and you're like, oh, I have a million questions, please email them in, because we do want to talk about just all of the deepness of this and what happens in that side of it, that emotion part of what we're going through. In sex.
And I do have to mention, because it's one of my many pet peeves, in my many years in academia, many years of education, my thickest notebook, it's over 4 inches thick, my thickest notebook is a pathologizing of sexuality. And we have, it's just tab after tab after tab, endless saying, oh, well, Tera's issue is this. And we pathologize and we say, oh, well, she has and we fill in the blank.
Right.
And I think that's
low libido.
so sad. So it would be the low libido disorder. And I'm a sex therapist. That's my field. But we've done this horribly. And so now we're just labeling Tera or Phyllis or Glenn or whoever. And it's so dehumanizing that we're like, oh, well, she has this problem. She has this disorder. So I just love what you say, to do podcasts based on relationship, not based on, and of course, even if you go to the grocery store, you pick up Cosmo or what, I don't know if I can say that on the air, but anyway, you pick up one of these magazines, and in every one of them, there's at least one article. You flip it. It's all about technique. It's all about position. Oh, you need a new position. And I don't want to say never, but it's virtually never about actually what's happening in the relationship. It's just about a new technique new position. Oh, you try this and you'll live happily ever after, and completely misses the whole point,
Yeah.
So
which is
good.
so sad. It's maddening.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do the wheel.
Okay. Who's doing the wheel? What are we doing it about?
Well, I think we should do it about sex.
Okay.
We could do another issue-specific wheel.
Yeah.
All right.
On.
Sex.
Well,
Okay, I'll start.
okay.
I'll give you a minute to
follow
think
your
about
lead
it.
there. Yeah. Okay.
Definitely anger about what we didn't know when we got married,
Yeah.
and the miseducation and the no education. A lot of hurt in our first few days of being sexually active, and just total confusion, and that brought sadness for sure. Just sadness of what in the world. Just kind of it all came, at 19 years old, just kind of came caving in on me. Felt so lonely because, as I've said before, if no one has talked to me before, then who in the world do you talk to now?
Right.
And I definitely felt fear that this has all been a lie, and now this is it forever. Like, everyone in my life has lied to me, and now just this is it. This is what I'm expected to do as a wife. The whole wifely duty thing. A lot of fear.
Wow.
Definitely guilt and shame on how much I rejected you and just pushed you away. Tremendous joy in where we've gotten to. Tremendous joy in just where we've gotten to. And I think tremendous joy in the fact of the healing. Like I never would have dreamed that I could have gone from feeling so much pressure over sex to actually now, and even in this episode with Tera sharing, like I started thinking, gosh, when was the last time I felt pressure?
Wow.
I cannot even remember.
Wow.
And that for me, it's like I don't feel the pressure anymore. And I love that. Like I love where our sexual relationship has gotten to, where it's fun, and it is through just that incredible friendship. And I love showing up for you, and you love showing up for me, and I've figured out the pleasure part of it, and you have too, and lots of joy.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, for me, so much joy. And, we've shared so many times that I feel like I'm just getting to know you, which stuns me.
Yeah.
'Cause we've been together a bit.
Yeah.
And that's very true in our sexual relationships. Like, how can this be that I'm just getting to know this girl? I mean, and there's so much joy in that, even on a macro level, and that's why I love long-term monogamous relationships. It's like, wow, this is possible. I don't know how many times we've been involved sexually together, and every time is like a new. And you always tease me because I'll be like, I think that was the best sexual encounter we've ever had, and you're like, babe, you said that 11,000 times so far. So, but I think it's true. It's stunning to me. I think it reflects the genius of God that it just keeps getting better and better. So much hurt from so many different things. A lot of joy that there's no longer hurt. I don't remember the last time that I felt hurt as far as our sexual interaction. Feeling rejected. It's just stunning to me. A lot of sadness that we missed so long. There's still trauma in that for us. And so much sadness that this is cultural. It's across the board. I mean, we sit with very, very, very few couples who start out with a positive sexual relationship. A little bit of loneliness, even in that quest, helping people. But, for so many years, there was so much loneliness. I can remember laying beside you in bed as you gently snored. And I literally lay there for hours. I'd just lay in bed 2, 3 or more hours, just lonely, alone, sexually. Still fear sometimes. And, of course, I'm really good at just sharing that with you, talking about sex, sharing sexual fantasies, sharing sexual thoughts, sexual joy points. And I'm ecstatic that I'm able to just say to you, I'm feeling some fear. You do the 3 phrases, and you follow my energy. You're present with me. You ooh me. You're safe with me. And it's stunning to me that we processed that through in 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Whereas 30 years ago, we didn't process it through in 3 weeks.
Wow.
That's just insane that there's that much difference. A lot of guilt. Oh, my goodness. I couldn't have written a worse script, and I'm a very good writer. I couldn't have written a worse script as far as how things went. And, we were set up horribly, but I really missed so much with you for so long, so much damage, really gross. A lot of shame in that. I was just a bad version of me for a long time, a bad version of your husband who you needed. I don't know if I've covered anger yet, but so much anger. It just pisses me off that we've done this. And it's centuries old, as I always say. It's not a new development, but we need to shift this thing.
Yeah, we do.
Because it is just devastating and for the individual couple, but then societally as well. And I think I said joy.
Yeah.
I like being your sexual friend.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. I have a lot of joy right now that I'm going to process. My first joy is that I married somebody that not only does he pursue me sexually and loves me, oh my gosh, and just like makes me feel so worthy, to be here. He's also willing to be vulnerable with the world and share what is happening with us in our relationship, because we know there are so many couples out there that are having the same experiences. And you may even be having the experiences that we were having 4 years ago, pre-connection codes, where we were having just endless fights. I mean, that's where the trauma stems from. That's why his joy quickly turns to sadness, because that's where we were. And so that he is willing to share where we're at now, even when we miss, even share our misses. We often think that we have so much shame in our misses, which is kind of silly to me. Like, no human is perfect. Of course Wes Wages is going to miss, and of course I'm going to miss. And, but he's willing to do that. And then I also just have so much joy in knowing where we are today, that while, yes, because of my phase of life that I'm in, of the kids and all of the extra stuff that this can feel like pressure, I have joy that I'm still willing to show up to the workout now, that I didn't stop going to the gym because I changed gyms. I'm finally in something, through taking the connection codes and through late night, where I'm finally seeing the results that I have wanted for years. And that to me is just such a game changer in our relationship, to where now most times when Wes is sharing his sexual joy with me, I'm able to be like, okay, bud, like let's do this thing. What are you thinking about? And that is mind blowing to me, that I'm now walking away from our experiences feeling so glad that I showed up, where before I remember at times just feeling like a body, and I haven't felt like a body in 2 years because of this. So for those of you that are listening, they're like, oh gosh, so much shame and sex and fear when he brings it up or she brings it up. I want to say it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And we have resources, not only this podcast, but on our website, connectioncodes.co, where you can learn more about our foundations course to get that emotional connection, and then our late night to get that sexual friendship, and experience the sexual joy that you've been missing for however long that you've been together. And also, I want to remind listeners that we also share this podcast on YouTube. And so you can watch this and you can share it with your friends and your family, and definitely get this word out for the ladies listening. Like, share this with all your girlfriends. Be like, hey girls, I know you may be feeling this. So I care about you enough to tell you that there's something out there that can change this for you and your partner. So thank y'all. Thank you, everybody. So Glenn?
Yes, because of that, we say, hello world, you need this.
You deserve this.
Let's do this.
Let's do this.